Hi, ladies, gentlemen, every gender non-conforming identity in between. My name is Vita. You may also know me as Vita Starkin or VMSCH, and I'm a self-proclaimed multidisciplinary creative and multidimensional trauma experiencer. What's a multidisciplinary creative? Well, I'm a classically trained pianist and organist that goes around the world playing jazz festivals. I am a digital artist who is featured at Art Week in Hong Kong recently. I do a lot of work within Web3 and the metaverse and different projects that are community-led. And for the last 5 years, I've been running a digital creative production company that's worked with brands such as Allianz, Hang Seng Bank, and Nomad Caviar. Before we start, let me ask you a question. How do you deal when you feel? Have you ever found yourself dealing with stress, anxiety, or difficult emotions by binge watching Netflix, drinking a bit too much, endless doom scrolling, or engaging in some other mindless activity? We've all been there. We were trying to pick away the scabs of existential dread and fill the void with stuff, unhealthy behaviors, or sheer procrastination. If you take one thing away from this talk, let it be this. Don't run away from the void. Run at it. Run at it armed with something to say and some way to say it, be that musically, visually, or whatever wonderful, wacky, uniquely you way that you communicate yourself and express what's going on in your head to the world. From my experience, the only way to stop the void from consuming every aspect of life and becoming a manageable but necessary part of the experience is to communicate creatively. All the work that you see on the screen is stuff I've done over the last 2 years. It's kind of my way of getting out of my head and into my heart. The short-term solutions, the metaphorical band-aids over the gaping wound, a chaotic cacophony of trying to change your mood with substances, possessions, or simply noise. They all come from the same place. The incessant need for another overwhelming dopamine hit. And as humans, we do love a quick fix. We live in an instant culture, able to receive any point of information with just a touch of a button. Our need for speed has been rapidly increasing over the years. In the 1950s, the average advertisement was 1 minute long. In 2023, we are frustrated when we can't skip a 5-second micro ad on our 24/7 screens. I know I have to make them. And when I started working in advertising, it was great being able to create longer form content with interesting narratives. The state of the industry is it's a moving picture with some text. How can we be surprised that we want to treat pain similarly? How can we expect to sit with grief, anger, and dark thoughts that go around in our heads, uncomfortable truths that keep us awake at night and uneasy? It is so natural to want to run away from these feelings quickly and replace them with something that makes us instantly forget ourselves and what we are indeed really running away from. I have firsthand experience of running away from pain. This is a self-portrait I made in 2021. That's me in the middle. Just over 5 years ago, I was chemically dependent on opioid painkillers, among other substances as well. My coping mechanisms had spiraled out of control. I was daily using a dose that if I took it today would kill me instantly. I didn't wake up one day as a teenager and decide, poly-drug abuse, that's what I want to do with my life. I don't know if you can tell, I was a rather unusual kid. I loved music, art, musical theater, paranormal experiences, ancient history, lots of different things. But from my earliest memories, I truly felt alive when engaging musically or artistically. I was a sensitive kid, and school was difficult for me. I was overloaded, and what I now know was experiencing sensory meltdowns, but fluorescent lights, itchy fibers, and loud noises made school a difficult place for me to be. But I was smart, and I was sailing through academically, so the support that I got was not the support that I needed. A teacher at primary school identified that some of my issues might be coming from boredom and introduced me to music and arts, and I began to flourish. My issues went away as soon as I touched a piano or a paintbrush. And I wish that's where I could end it and say, and that's how I developed healthy coping mechanisms. No. I have a connection in my head where when I hear music, I see colors, I see moving images, I see lots of different visual things, and it fully immerses my mind. Around 11 years old, I was diagnosed with autism, and the connection between the music and the art was something called synesthesia, which is found 5 times more often in autistic neurodiverse people. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I was diagnosed with ADHD. Growing up neurodiverse, I never felt like I fit in. I was bullied. As a twice exceptional individual, that means gifted and troubled, I struggled in traditional schools where my academic performance overshadowed my need for support. Twice exceptional brains are different structurally to neurotypical brains. We have increased demands on our limbic system, and we can be overexcitable and over-emotional, as well as suffering from intense sensory issues. This can lead to extreme emotions and negative feelings, mental health issues that I experienced firsthand in my early teenage years. And so it began, the opening of the void, the feeling that I'm too weird to fit in, that I'm not going to make friends in the world, that I'm better off alone, that I'm other, that no one would even be interested in trying to understand me. I internalized this. At the same time, my mother was going through a full-on mental health crisis. My family life became frantic, as dealing with psychosis is never easy or understandable. I didn't understand that what was going on had nothing to do with me, and I thought that I was inherently bad. Then began the sexual and emotional abuse. Too many occurrences to get into in one TED Talk. I was groomed online and ran again and again into situations with abusive older men. Somewhere in the chaos, I met the answer to my problems, a chemical solution. As is the case for many addicts, trauma was my gateway drug, and I felt more void than human. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to think that substances were the problem, but between the ages of 17 to 22, until I had a few months into my own sobriety, the music and the art dropped away from my life in many significant forms, and the pain grew worse. In came the chemical dependency, the life-threatening addiction that ran chaos, me trying to scratch just a few hours clean before undoubtedly succumbing to addiction's false safety and security. Many addicts feel intensely, with a void inside and a voice in your head that tells you are undeserving of love. Substances are used to varying degrees of success to provide short-term solutions for long-term problems. Interestingly, people with ADHD are 2 times more likely to suffer from substance abuse issues due to poor impulse control. It wasn't until many years of struggling and having an unexpected spiritual experience that I willingly arrived, pockets empty, half dead, and terrified, on the cold blue seat of a 12-step recovery meeting in London. And that's the first day of the rest of my life. I'm coming up to 5 years of continuous sobriety from alcohol and drugs. And I owe everything I have in my life today to 12-step recovery. From building a community of supportive, sober growth-minded individuals, sharing honestly and taking inventory of my own bad habits and actions, and understanding what true unconditional love is, completing and living the 12 steps, and creating healthy coping mechanisms to deal with the void. The recovery process gave me the formula to understand my patterns of self-destruction, to analyze what in myself was uneasy and how to counteract this all with the support of a loving community. I learned how to have healthy, supportive friendships and communicate with others in recovery. Being around other recovering addicts made me realize that I wasn't alone, I wasn't weird, I wasn't unlovable as I previously thought, and the things that I used to hate about myself became things that I was proud of. Human connection isn't actually about being surrounded by people. It's about genuinely connecting and opening up to another human. You can be surrounded by people and wholly disconnected. Conversely, you can be sitting alone in the middle of the night listening to your favorite musician, feeling connected to the pain that they speak about, and feeling seen. Emotional isolation or avoidance, being out of touch with your feelings, also counts as a disconnection. When we fill the void with temporary distraction and hedonistic pleasures, it can only lead to more chaos. Art saves lives. Making it has certainly saved mine. Listening to it, engaging with it, and seeing the creations of others has made my life worth living. I am also a chronic overthinker. I overthink and I overanalyze everything. The only thing that stops my thinking is to be in action, to counter it with doing. And you can only go one step at a time, breaking things down and working things out gradually, taking things step by step, and doing the next right thing that's in front of me. Not everything needs to be solved immediately, but I can only do what I can do in this moment. My slogan is, if I don't do art, I go madder, because it's true. Art, music, creativity, and any positive form of self-expression which isn't tearing somebody else down is a healthy, solid coping mechanism, regardless of your skill level. If you have something to say, don't keep it inside, don't yell it out in misplaced anger. Get it out in a therapeutic way, artistic or musically, or however you want to do it. Document your pain and share with others to let them know that what pain is normal and no one is alone. The 12th step of the 12-step program states that having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Well, I had a spiritual experience, and what I take from this step means sharing the message. Where you are, where you've been, what you've been through. Let other people know that they aren't alone and create human connections. For me, there isn't a better way to do this than through music and art. Around 3 years into my sobriety, I started getting very physically unwell. Over a few months, I suffered from a series of partial joint dislocations known as subluxations that left me unable to walk without assistance. It was a medical mystery, with doctors running multiple tests for autoimmune conditions and everything coming up blank. It wasn't until I Googled, this is real, autism bendy joints pop out, that I discovered Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, is often seen in autistic people. I think from the latest research, it's 8 times more likely that you will have EDS if you are an assigned female at birth autistic person. Some of the symptoms that I have are hypermobile joints that can easily dislocate or subluxate, easy bruising, hyperextendable skin, digestive issues, and spontaneous hemorrhaging. Sitting hovered in medical braces during COVID on my sofa, I reached the lowest mental health point I have ever been in recovery. What made it worse is I had a condition that I could easily be prescribed my drug of choice for, and the temptation to use has never been so prevalent. All I knew is I didn't want to return to active addiction. I was done with being a junkie, and it wasn't the time to give up. As a result, I've been through multiple dislocations and partial dislocations of everything that you can see that has a brace on, both of my knees, my ankles, my wrists, my shoulders. I've been through surgery, you name it, I've been through it without opiate or opioid painkillers. I used to use when I woke up in the morning, I used to use throughout the day, I used to use before I go to bed, I used to hate the 10 minutes of waking up before I could use. So to be able to go through the last 2.5, 3 years of having the diagnosis without it has been like the most amazing gift. My friends encouraged me to use my talents to help others experiencing the same situation. I decided to turn my pain into art, and I made a comic about my diagnosis, poking fun at the broken medical system. I also created digital pieces about addiction, EDS, and neurodiversity. Some of you have seen them today. And I began to share this on social channels and get vulnerable. Surely enough, people began to reach out to let me know that they'd been going through similar things, and that seeing a silly comic was making their day a little bit better. And I got to meet some great online friends and have a community of people going through the same diagnostic process. We are all human, we're all flawed, and we are all consumed with different depths of the void. But we are all deserving of unconditional love. Despite the differences that we try to paint amongst ourselves as having, human beings fundamentally need love, community, and authentic connection. Expressing this through creativity as a way to cope and flourish through difficult times And sharing strength and solidarity through the worst times, the best of times, is the way I move forward in my life. But triggers happen. A few weeks ago, one of my worst fears came to light. It triggered every abandonment, every unlovable narrative, every emotional hangover from my PTSD and my sex abuse just went rampant in my head. I'm sure you've all been through it. I went through a breakup. It was unexpected, it was out of the blue, and it was messy, and it was someone I'd just given my heart to. Years ago, I would have gone out and overdosed over something like this. I would have run so far into the void, it would have been untrue. In this era of my life, I did the opposite. I was surrounded by loving friends, communicating, creating art, and being reminded that I wasn't alone, unlovable, or abandoned. And as my friend walked to my ex's house to pick up the bags of my stuff, I sat on the other side of town, playing piano with tears in my eyes at a gig with two other friends of mine, singing cheesy jazz songs and feeling a little bit lighter about the situation, trusting that the universe had a bigger and better plan for me and all was to be revealed. I picked up my stuff and threw myself back into the creative collaboration vortex. I used to live life gripped with fear of the unknown, fear of the void, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. And I'm not perfect by any means. Process of progress rather than perfection. And it's really not a lonely journey anymore. I've spent 5 years building a beautiful community, and I can genuinely say it fills me with love and glee and happiness when I see my other fellow creatives doing well and succeeding. I'll lead you with this as the last thought for the day. Pain is a part of the human experience. It's necessary, and it tests our fearlessness and resilience. We are made to live in symbiosis with the void inside of us. For me, painkillers and other addictive short-term coping mechanisms were parasitism. I was harmed and the void grew stronger and stronger. Now I try and live in a state of mutualism with my pain. I can sit with it. By using creativity as a healthy coping mechanism, I grow stronger from these experiences, and I use the void as ignition to create, rather than as fuel to destroy myself. There's a visual piece and there's some excerpt from some music called Sit With Yourself. And this is a song and a piece I wrote about how pain doesn't have to overpower me, how we can sit with ourselves, process things step by step, and come from a place of love and creation when our head is spinning. Thank you guys so much for listening to me speak. Sit with yourself, sit with your pain, live with it, and act out of love rather than fear.